Well, what is up, everybody? Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm ready to go. Ryan, are you ready to go? You ready to do this, man?
Let's do it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think we're here with the people today that somehow did not make their way to a beach or a lake or something. We're right in the middle of the summer, but we got people on a webinar today. It's going to be fun. In fact, what we would love for those of you on here to do is go ahead and put in the chat, change it to everyone, and give us your name, your church, your location. Let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're watching from, especially if you're watching from, if you actually are on vacation day and you're watching from a beach or a lake, let us know that too. Let us know which exotic location you're joining us from. Hey, my name is Louie, and I'm with ICN, Irresistible Church Network. And if this is one of your first times interacting with us, ICN is a network of over 200 churches from all over the world that are going all in to design our churches to engage unchurched people and inspire them to follow Jesus. And sometimes we do webinars like this because we're all about helping churches and church leaders go further faster, especially when it comes to designing your church to engage unchurched people. And so today we're going to have a great conversation about marketing and where that falls in today. We have a set of Irresistible Church Network distinctives. There's 7 of those that you can see on the screen right there. Today's falls under that heading of outward facing as we're marketing our churches digitally to the communities around us. As you can see, we hit on all kinds of different topics from time to time, whether it's healthy leadership, being strategically organized, being for our communities, whether it's about creating irresistible environments, or whether it's being committed to the next generation, and finally, intentional relationships, or sometimes we say relational discipleship. But today's falls under that outward facing distinctive as we talk about marketing. So today's title for our webinar is actually 3 principles for marketing your church. And I love the subtitle. The subtitle is Your Community Can't Visit Your Church If They Don't Know You Exist. So hopefully today's webinar will give you some tips and tricks and maybe change a perspective to help you guys go further faster in this idea of marketing our churches as we are attempting to be outward facing churches. But I don't know anything about marketing, so I brought my friend Ryan St. John along with me today. So he's the real expert here. So let me introduce you to Ryan. Ryan is the president of Aclaro, which is a marketing and advertising agency here in Atlanta, Georgia. And so a few things about Ryan. Ryan is originally from Chicago, but he's been here in the South for
Go
many
Bears.
years. And Ryan, I'm safe to say that you have embraced all things Southern culture except for Waffle House. Come on,
100%. Not
Ryan.
going there. Absolutely
He's
not.
not going there. He's not going there. He cannot join me. So if you're in the chat today, I want you to show Ryan what's up by putting in the chat how you prefer your hash browns at Waffle House. I like mine smothered, covered, scattered, and peppered. How do you like that, Ryan?
That's
So Ryan,
phenomenal.
before we jump into all the content today, why don't you just introduce yourself, let everybody know a little bit about yourself and your family, and let's go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to Louis' point, I grew up in Chicago, moved to Atlanta about 20 years ago. It feels like yesterday. My wife, Heidi, and I have been married for 18 years, and we have 3 kids, but it feels like 30. So I've got my daughter who's 14, a son who's 12, and another son who's 6. And the older 2 are actually away at Winship Camp all week this week. So this week we've got like single parenting, single child parenting, which is kind of it's a good break.
Yeah, that's gotta be way easier. Yeah, we I just have 2, so we're still playing that man-to-man defense. You guys are in the zone defense.
Yeah.
That's harder to deal with. So let me give you guys a little bit of uh, a preview of how this is going to roll today. So Ryan is going to spend the next several minutes kind of walking through a presentation with us about these 3 principles for marketing your church. And this isn't just something Ryan made up in his brain. Ryan has actually been doing real world in the trenches marketing with 6 of our ICN partner churches. And so this is real world stuff, real world principles that are happening out there in our church network that we want to help you guys understand. So here's what's going to happen. Ryan's going to be doing that. While Ryan is giving his presentation, there is going to be a Q&A with Ryan on the back end of this. So go ahead as Ryan is presenting and questions are popping up in your head. Make sure you change your chat function to everyone so that everyone can see it. But go ahead and be putting your questions in the chat as we go throughout the presentation so that our team can collect those so that when Ryan's presentation is over, we can get those questions to Ryan and he can address some of those as we go. So with that said, Ryan, take it away, my friend. Take us there. Let's do this.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. Thanks for the opportunity and so grateful to be here. I've been doing marketing a long time, but I really love the work that we do for and with the local church. And so that's what we're doing today is talking about how to leverage digital marketing to reach your community. Just a little background on myself. To Louis' point, I started the agency 20 something years ago, which I always joke that you measure that in dog years. So multiply it by seven, and it actually feels like 160 something years is what it feels like. But fortunately, about 3 years ago, almost 3.5 years ago, I got kind of new life in the agency world when I had the opportunity to start working with ICN, not only here in North America, but actually with all of our networks in the UK and Ireland, South Africa, Latin America, and Australasia. And so that has
Let's
been
be honest, Ryan.
great.
You enjoy the international traveling a lot more than dealing with our U.S. partners. Is that correct?
I like you the best, and then I think like all the travel stuff is number two and three. So part of that.
Okay, okay, there we go.
I know you got to like pick your favorite, right? It's hard to say that out loud. So yeah, I loved working with those networks. And about a year ago, we started to think about what does it look like to take all these years of agency experience and start to leverage it for the local church. And so about 12 months ago, we started this Agency for Churches beta program with initially three churches, Journey Church out in Murray, Kentucky, Lakeside Church in the UK, and then Life Switch Church in New Zealand. I know it's not a super creative name for a beta, but I'll fix that as we get closer to full launch. And actually, since then, we've added about another 10 churches. So we've got about 12 or 13 churches now that we help support kind of on a weekly basis. So everything we talk about today is really kind of in two parts. The first part of those three principles for outward-facing marketing you mentioned, Louis, and then the second part is I actually have a whole bunch of campaigns that we're going to run through. So I'm going to show you just very practically how do we apply those principles to actual campaigns, talk about the successes, and most importantly, talk about the failures we've had, because that's the way we learn when it comes to marketing is we got to have some failures. So with that, let's dive in. The three principles for outward-facing marketing. The next slide here kind of shows the three at a high level is one, we want to be strategically aligned in everything we do. I know a lot of your churches, you guys already operate your church this way. You're strategically aligned with all the programs you create. The same thing has to be true with marketing and advertising. Two, surgical approach. Everything we do should have a clearly defined audience, should have relevant messaging, and we should use the best channel to reach that messaging. The old days of, the old acronym of spray and pray is gone. It's digital advertising allows you to be very, very specific. I can show a ad to Louis and just follow him around whenever I want to. So we should leverage that technology for our churches, not just for business or for the marketplace. And then being journey focused is really important, and not journey the church, but being journey in terms of how people are walking through their journey to find your church and then start showing up on Sunday mornings as a part of that. So let's dive a little bit deeper into those. The first one being strategically aligned. There's really three objectives or three goals that marketing can help you accomplish within your church. The first one is brand awareness. The second one is new attendees. And the third one is engagement from current attendees. So think about people are already showing up at the church. How do you get them to engage more within the church, maybe in the community? Everything we've done with this beta has really been focused on the first two. So we'll spend most of our time there, and the campaigns you see will kind of follow as a part of that. I think, I hear on an often basis or frequent basis, not only from churches, but from the marketplace, people will say, well, I tried to do marketing on my own, or I tried to do a digital campaign. I launched something on Meta, ran it for a few weeks or a few months. It just didn't work. So I gave up. And sometimes you'll hear from a church, like, I just don't think marketing works for churches. Most often when I kind of dig into the campaigns and what did they do, it was a misalignment at the very top in terms of what they were trying to accomplish for their goal. And then it kind of just flows through the rest, the other pieces that we'll talk about. So starting with your goal in mind is really important. And to Louis, stole my big headline. People can't go to your church if they don't know exists. Like, it feels so obvious, right? Is people need to know you guys exist. That's the importance, the brand awareness objective. And then new attendees is how do you then get them to show up on a Sunday morning? So that's the first one. The second principle is really having this surgical approach to marketing campaigns. I really break this down into three areas. The first one being having defined audiences. So it's a really important exercise to sit down and actually define and list out each audience that you want to reach through your digital campaigns. I always start at the kind of the biggest, broadest one, which is the physical community. So think about the distance that people are willing to drive to come to your church on a Sunday. Usually it's some kind of a driving distance, like 30 minutes away, an hour away. And this is going to look different church to church. We found that with, for example, Journey Church in Murray, Kentucky. They have people that are willing to drive an hour to get to church every Sunday. So that may be one extreme of what that looks like. The other extreme would be me. I'm going to raise my hand for that. I live in Midtown Atlanta. I go to Buckhead Church. I'm willing to drive 10 minutes to get to church. So it's like right on my kind of the outskirts, the end of my driving distance. But knowing that for your church is really important. If you start advertising to people outside of that area, you're just wasting advertising dollars. People aren't willing to respond to that if they're too far away within your targeting. So that one's an important one. The other one we look at is life stage, and this is probably one you guys are already doing within your environments, your ministries within your church. Think about everything from next gen to college students to young families to empty nesters. Define each one of those segments. Define them not only by age group, but maybe even area of town. Some of the campaigns we would build is to say we want to target digital campaigns to empty nesters living in this neighborhood. You can even get that specific with it. So it's good to even define those two as they kind of overlap. Faith journey, probably maybe another obvious one. You think about everything that happens on the internet, right? Is we're hitting a whole bunch of people in a whole bunch of stages of life. You have the people who have been Christians for 50 years on one end, and the people who want nothing to do with God on the other, right? So just be sensitive to that, be aware of that, define those as separate groups because you're going to run different campaigns based on where they're at in their faith journey. Digital communities is one that has actually been an experiment for us. So one of the things we started to look at is to say, how do we build digital communities based on intent topic or interest? So if you think about kind of your community, however big that is, there's a portion of people within that community, they may all be struggling with the same felt need. So think about all the people who are actively searching for solutions to anxiety or depression, who are looking for community, that type of stuff. That could be its own kind of digital audience that you target. Is you could say, I want to set up a campaign and show digital ads to everybody who's searching for help with anxiety that's within kind of the 30-minute radius of our church. That's a whole other way to kind of think about defined audiences, but it's still good to put those down on paper and define some of those. I'll actually show you guys some campaigns later on where we did some of that around felt needs and how successful they were. It was pretty surprising. Um, Relevant messaging. So relevant messaging is really about kind of two different pieces here. One is really based around our core belief as an agency, which is people buy emotionally and justify their buying decisions intellectually. For 20 something years, we've done campaigns all over the map, everything from like straight sales messages to come visit our church, which is there's like no hook there. It's just like a straight sales message to being super creative with headlines to hook somebody, to make them laugh or smile, make them cry, do something to elicit an emotional response. That's the type of advertising that actually works the best. They'll find a reason to go to your church if you can hook them emotionally. And I'll show you some examples of what that looks like. The second part of that is keep the audience, the intended audience in mind. There is nothing worse than showing the wrong message to the wrong group. It's a waste of advertising dollars, and it really creates frustration with the people on the other end of the advertising. My example of that, kind of my silly example, is I live in Midtown, like an hour away from Louis, I think, in a high-rise building. If I were to start seeing digital ads throughout my day for Tractor Supply, advertising like horse feed, I'd be really frustrated. I have zero need for Tractor Supply and I have zero need for horse feed. It would be a bad use of their advertising dollar, and it actually has a negative effect on their brand because I'm frustrated as to why I'm seeing an ad about this. So really, really important to align your message with who you're targeting as a part of that. The third part about a surgical approach to marketing and advertising is efficacious channels. Efficacious is my favorite word. I think, Louis, you know that. It is the combination of both effective and efficient. And everything I do when it comes to digital advertising, I want to be both effective and efficient. So if you break down digital advertising, it actually falls into three different categories. Search, social, and then web app, or I would just kind of call it the junk drawer of everything else. Search is stuff that you're probably used to, right? As you think about Google, you're doing searches on Google, the organic search results that come up as a part of that. Maybe some people are doing Google Ads in terms of paid search as a part of that. That would put in that same category. I would also put AI assistants in that category now. So you think about ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot. Those are all search channels that we can target either organically or from a paid standpoint. I'll talk a little bit more about AI assistants in a couple slides because it gives us a whole other set of opportunities as the local church to reach people right where they're at. The middle category is really around social. I am sure probably everybody in this webinar has been doing organic social posts for a long time. I think it's a great part of kind of your marketing tech stack. You should keep doing that. Probably some of these channels you're more active on than others. Maybe some you haven't tried at all. I think there's two pieces to this, right? Is there's a value to being active from an organic standpoint on these, but also a paid standpoint, leveraging their networks to serve up digital ads. I think a lot of people will tend to look at channels and kind of have these stereotypes around them, like LinkedIn is only if I'm reaching business people, or Facebook is only if I'm trying to reach an older generation, right? Start with some of those, but I would say experiment with them. It's interesting when we were doing some ad campaigns in the UK trying to reach actually local pastors for a webinar very similar to this. I was talking to some of the leaders over there, and they're like, yeah, this is the UK. Our pastors are not on LinkedIn. There's just no way they're going to see it. And I was like, okay, well, let's run an experiment. It's worth trying, trial and error. It was crazy the response we got from LinkedIn of pastors in the UK. So it's actually our most effective channel now. And if we would have gone into it and said, well, that's just not where our people are, we wouldn't have been able to kind of reach that market. So be creative as you think about some of these in terms of organic and paid advertising. The last one there is around web and app. So if it's basically digital advertising and it's not in search and social, it kind of falls in this other bucket. At the very bottom, you have things like CTV, connected TV. So if you think about Louis, you're at home watching Hulu at night and you see the 30-second ad come up, that's the opportunity from a connected TV standpoint. And you could be just as targeted with that. I can say only show this ad to people watching Hulu in this neighborhood and just make sure every kind of ad dollar that I have goes farther. Where you'll see most digital advertising in this kind of category is what you see as native and display. So on this next slide, you can kind of see we all are exposed to native and display advertising. You probably just didn't know what it meant. But anywhere you go, weather, news, sports, pretty much any publisher website out there is doing advertising these days. And I always use the Weather Channel as an example because they plaster ads everywhere. You could see 50 advertisers all on one page. But this is a great example. Went to the Weather Channel. I'm seeing ads here for Acura. This is a good example of I'm not looking to buy a car and I wouldn't buy an Acura, so I don't know why they're showing me ads, but bad mismatch there. But this is really what native and display is. So if you think about that as the local church, you're serving up these digital ads. Somebody's checking the weather for your community, and they start to see ads here for your church. It's a great way to reach people, and it's really cost effective in terms of how it works. So those are the three categories. That's how I think about surgical approach. The last kind of principle is a part of this before I jump into some of these ad campaigns is really around being journey focused. You talk about the different audiences. We talked about 2 slides ago or 1 slide ago. Just making sure we identify buyer journeys for them. So what steps do they need to take to go from they first heard about your church to showing up on a Sunday? And obviously, depending where they're at in their life, some of those journeys are shorter than others. A really good example of this is if you think about the person who is far from God, who doesn't have a relationship, doesn't have a church, if they see the first ad they see for your church says, come visit us on Sunday, we're not asking that person to take a small step. We're asking them to take a massive leap. So you've got to think about all these kind of smaller steps along the way that get them there. And we'll talk a little bit about events and how events are a great kind of stepping stone to get them from brand awareness to showing up on a Sunday morning. The one other thing I'll say about being journey focused is the importance of planning for the extremes. So I put this in 2 categories, one-click buyer journeys, and I'm still new here, months after journeying. So one-click really breaks down into 2 different categories. One of the things that was kind of a surprise to us is when you think about brand advertising, which the purpose of brand advertising is literally just to put the church name out there. I'm not looking for them to click or to visit. I'm just trying to build an awareness that the church exists. I was surprised how many people would see a brand ad and then show up 2 days later to church. What that started to teach us is there's a segment of your community that would go to your church if they knew your church existed. And so literally the only gap is a brand awareness gap. You don't have to convince them any other way. So be prepared for that as you do some of your brand advertising. There will be those really short buyer journeys that people show up on a Sunday and say, "Hey, I saw your ad on Weather Channel. This is great. I'm so glad to know you guys are here as a part of the community." That's like low hanging fruit when I think about that. The other side of that, I kind of referenced earlier in terms of AI assistance. This is just another opportunity that it's crazy. It changes like literally what we do on a daily basis from an agency standpoint. But if you think about the way that people buy products or services or they look for a new church, the way that process happens is changing, and it's changed exponentially over the last 6 months. The way this used to happen, right, is that people would come into a community, they would do some research, create maybe a list of churches in the area, let's say a list of 10, excuse me, do some research on their own, maybe check out some websites, look at some social channels, and narrow that down to a list of 3 churches. And then from those 3 churches, they visit them and then kind of pick their final their final church they want to stay with, right? That's a typical buyer journey. One of the things we're seeing with AI assistance is these one-click buyer journeys, excuse me, where people are going into AI assistants like Claude and ChatGPT and Copilot, and they're literally prompting it saying, "I'm looking for a church in my community. Which one should I go to?" The first church that comes up is the one they go to. Like they don't have any options. They literally just go to that first church, which on one hand is pretty good if we can leverage that. If your church is the one coming up, that's phenomenal. If it's not coming up, it's a problem, right? They're not even going to consider you as one of their options.
Yeah, I feel like you just exposed how I've made every decision over the last 12
Right,
months.
right, exactly. A little concerning when you think about a car. It's like, I'm going to go with that car. That's a big purchase on a one click.
Yeah, hey guys, I just want to remind you uh, at this time too that you may have already heard something that Ryan's already said that has sparked some question in your head. So make sure you're going into the chat, changing your chat function to everyone, and put your question in the chat for Ryan so that our team can get those ready for him at the end of the presentation. All right, go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Louis. Give me a second to get some more coffee. All right, I'm still new here after months of journeying, so this is the maybe the other extreme. We've seen this across multiple churches. Is for some of these churches, we started running campaigns last summer. What we found kind of over time is that it's interesting. People would see the ads over a few month period before they finally made a decision to show up on a Sunday. And they would show up on a Sunday for maybe a few months. And maybe 6 months into this journey, that's when they would go to guest services and say, "Hey, I'm new here. I'd like to learn more about the church." And it's interesting in that conversation because guest services is like, "Oh, this is your first Sunday here." And the person would be like, "No, I've actually been coming for 6 months, but I still consider myself new." So kind of be aware of that. I mean, that's typical kind of marketing advertising is it takes time to get people from awareness all the way to when they actually, decide to identify themselves. So that's the other extreme there. So those are the 3 principles: being strategically aligned, having a surgical approach, and being journey focused are the 3. So let's kind of shift to this next stage here where we talk about some of those campaigns and how we apply those principles to actual campaigns for your local church. So the first one is kind of brand awareness. That's the first goal or objective we're going to talk about with these campaigns that I'll show you. A couple things to keep in mind when you think about brand awareness campaigns. One is we've said it a lot. We're going to keep saying it, right? Your community won't visit your church if they don't know you exist. Brand awareness campaigns are the foundation for everything we do. We are always running a brand awareness campaign 365 days a year. It's always kind of just that constant signal that you have on that helps support the rest of your campaigns. The goal here is not memory, or the goal here is memory. It's not visits. That we just want to make sure they see the church. They want to see the tagline. We want them for that to start to feel familiar so that as we ask them to take other steps, it's not taking a cold step for an organization they don't know. It's actually taking a warm step because they have some familiarity with the brand. Reach and frequency are most important here. So more times people see your brand, the more familiar it feels. This is why it's important that you don't do digital advertising in small kind of episodic chunks. You don't turn on ads for a week or for a month and then turn them off 3 months. You want to turn them on and just keep them on to keep staying in front of people. We know from the data that it takes about 7 to 9 impressions before people take the first action. They'll see your ad 7 to 9 times before they take the first click, which is why it's important to stay out there in front of them. Emotion and consistency. So this is really important. I know everyone has high bars, high standards in terms of just the quality of what you guys do in the local church. I think what's important here is just to be consistent. What is your brand voice? What does your brand stand for? Are you communicating that? And are you doing it consistently? If one ad looks really, really polished and one kind of looks thrown together, you're kind of sending mixed messages to them, and they now you're changing what the expectation is about their experience on Sunday. So be consistent there. And then the last piece around brand awareness campaigns, it's hard to measure directly. So you're not going to have somebody who sees an ad during the week, brand ad, and comes in on Sunday and says, hey, I saw, your ad while I was watching sports this weekend, right? It just doesn't happen. They just know it's familiar, and that's kind of how it comes across. So we really just measure in terms of reach and frequency as a part of that. So let's go to this next slide. Just really an example of brand campaign. So this is for Life Switch Church, kind of one of the original betas, again, based in New Zealand. I kind of laid out here how I think about those different principles. We wanted to leverage digital marketing, programmatic advertising. So again, that's everything that's web-based in terms of native and display. Think about those Acura car ads. That's kind of where these would show up. Really, we're targeting everybody in the community. So for them, they were like probably a 40-minute driving distance is how far people would come. So we said, okay, let's hit everybody within that 40-mile distance. And really, the core message here is really around a tagline. That's usually what I ask at church when we're working for them is what's like a single sentence or single statement that you use consistently Sunday in and Sunday out. And that's what we want to put on these ads. So you'll see for them, they have two different ones. Life is complicated. We want to help and connecting people to God. What's interesting is you kind of look at these metrics. So you have impressions, the number of times somebody saw an ad, clicks, which is the number of times they clicked on an ad, and then CTR, click-through rate, is just a percentage of that. What's crazy to me about this 30-day campaign, 133,000 impressions, number of times their ad was seen. 1,200 people clicked on that ad in 30 days to go to their website to learn more, and a 1.07%. My goal generally with brand ads is a 0.15%. So we are so far above and beyond that, it's not even funny. Like this is crazy to me on a brand ad. This tells me their community is looking for their church. They're looking for an opportunity or looking for a local church that resonates with them. And we see this then play forward when you look at guest services and how many people show up and do on a Sunday. It carries all the way through as a part of that. So this is a really good example of a great brand ad. Again, way overperformed. One of the successes. I will get to failures, I promise, but really good example of how you can do some brand advertising. If we go to the next slide, I'll just show you real quick. I'm not going to dive into the metrics here too much because I think the headlines are more important. I talked about creating an emotional connection. So you'll see the previous set of ads were really around a tagline. This is really about being more creative, especially for this community that's in Montana. So you see in the top there, not your grandma's church, but she's welcome too. Are you done with religion? Us too, Be Root Church. And then you don't have to believe to belong, Be Root Church. These were really interesting. They had a ton of impressions, 1 million impressions over 120 days, which is crazy. What that tells me as a marketer is there's not a lot of competition. There's lots of digital ad space available, but there aren't a lot of advertisers marketing within this community as a part of that. And click-through rate is a little bit better than average, again, a 0.15. But this is a really good example of how you can use some humor and some creativity with your ads to really shake people up and reach them. So if we just look at key takeaways from brand campaigns, I'll hit on these real quick. One, programmatic dominates brand delivery, which is just, again, to say it's the best way to reach people in your community. Again, if you think about web and app, those Acura ads, that's the best way to reach people with a brand ad. You're always trying to shoot between a 1.2% click-through rate and a 0.3 as a part of that. And then just remember when it comes to brand ads, they lose their effectiveness. So about every 30 days, we're changing out ads, digital ads for these churches. Because what ends up happening is people have seen the ads enough, they know what it's about, and they just tune it out. They don't even see it anymore. So every 30 days, change out your creative as a part of that. The other takeaways are budget does not equal performance. So this is kind of a misconception, is that a lot of churches will say, well, I don't have, the advertising budget of a large corporation. I think if you look across all the churches in our beta program, budgets on a monthly basis span anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Sorry, $500 to $2,000 a month. You don't have to spend a lot of money to be effective at digital advertising. The performance is the same if you spend $6,000 a month versus $1,000 a month. The difference is your reach. You can reach more people with more money as a part of that. So don't feel like you have to invest a lot of money to be effective there. And then those are just meta, so meta and programmatic in terms of cost per 1,000 impressions. You can kind of do the math, right? Is $2.40 per 1,000 impressions. You can kind of back your way into a budget or a number of reach in terms of that. So that's a really good example of all brand campaigns. This next section is really around net new attendees. So I'll do kind of the same thing, give you some high level points. I'll show you a couple campaigns, and then we'll talk about some key takeaways here before we move into questions. So new attendee campaigns, this is how do we get people to show up on a Sunday now that they have an awareness of who we are because of our brand campaigns, our brand ads. We want to start driving them to show up on a Sunday. So one, targeting is everything, right? Any organization that targets too wide of an area or the wrong people in the area, the ads are not gonna work. It's not gonna drive to Sunday. So making sure we're taking that surgical approach is really important. Having one clear CTA or call to action is really important at every milestone. So sometimes people get kind of caught up with an ad campaign where they're like, we're going to give you three things you can do, like visit our website, follow us, or come on a Sunday, right? We're asking somebody to do a lot of different actions and they get decision fatigue. It's much better to just pick one and have that one action than it is, and then do three ad sets than to try to put three calls to action all within the same ad. And think about it kind of all along the buyer journey, right? Is if somebody is brand new to church, if I just get them to click on an ad, that's a win, right? If they've been following us for a while and I wanted to come on a Sunday, then that's the win kind of lower in the funnel as a part of that. Measure everything. So conversion rates along the journey. So what will inevitably happen is as you kind of look at your ad data, you'll see, wow, we're reaching a whole lot of people in our community. And but nobody's clicking through on our ads. Nobody's going to the website. Nobody's following us on social. So something's broken there. Fix your creative to make sure you get more click-throughs before you work on the next part of the funnel, which would be they're going to our website. Now, how do we get them to show up on a Sunday? So things like that. Testing never stops. I kind of talked about this. I am all about experiments. We are always thinking of new ways to reach people and engage people. One of the ways that we're working on now is this idea of brand ambassadors for UGC, or user generated content. The thought here is if your church is doing an event for, let's say, families on a Saturday, I want to use a family within your church on a 15-second ad promoting the Saturday event. That way, as other families are seeing these ads, they feel like they're seeing themselves in that, and they're more willing to engage as a part of that. The UGC piece of that is just to say, don't over polish your ads. Like what works really well is 15-second videos that feel a little homemade. It's okay to have that. They don't have to have full production value to be effective. Um, Urgency and friction reduction. So this is really important. I talk about the events. It's just important to don't market anything you have too far in advance. If you're going to talk about an event that's happening in 3 months from now, nobody's going to engage in that campaign. You got to wait until you're like 2 to 4 weeks out so that there's a sense of urgency about registering now as a part of that. It's an important. And then the last piece of this is just make sure your digital house is in order. People will see great ads or great ad campaigns. They'll go to the website, they'll go to your social channels. Make sure everything looks good and looks professional. If it's a bad user experience on the website, or if the last time you did a social post was 2 years ago, it's just not going to work. People are going to be like, well, they're not active. They must be out of business. Something must be going on. So just keep that in mind. Keep your digital house in order. So let's look at a couple of campaigns here on the new attendee side. The first one is really around events, and I think these have been the most successful campaigns that we've done. Is any type of events. You see caroling services there for Lakeside Church in the UK, Jingle Jam, Daddy Daughter Dance. It's like time and time again, when I think about reaching new people, where they're willing to engage is midweek events. It's actually not on Sundays. So things like advertising around a new series maybe you have starting on Sunday don't work nearly as well as some of this type of stuff. So you can kind of see here some performance on some of this stuff. A 2.32% click-through rate is phenomenal. 1,100 people clicking through on an ad for the Daddy Daughter Dance example. The caroling services that was there for Lakeside that happened this last December, they actually had their highest turnout in the history of the church because of this ad campaign that we ran as a part of it. And they were all brand new names to the church. Jingle Jam was a good example of new families. I think they got 40 new families to sign up for this that were just brand new to the church that were started to come on a Sunday as a part of that. And then the Daddy Daughter Dance, I like to point this out. My friend Jordan, who's over there, who does marketing at Journey Church, this had really good performance in the digital ad campaign, but it didn't have a great turnout in terms of the actual event because we found out after the fact there was a ballet recital that basically the entire community was at the exact same night. So this is a great example. It's like your advertising campaign can be phenomenal, but if you don't align on the right dates, it could still kind of fall flat as a part of that. So, but we love to learn for this. Now we know future events, we got to check like every calendar in the community and make sure there is no competition as a part of that. So that's a great example. The next example I have is around content. I mentioned that series ads, I'm talking about the next series or content you're talking about is not very effective. But what is effective in terms of digital is felt needs. So this was some content that Life Switch put together around three different felt needs that we advertise, things around difficult conversations, what to do if you feel overwhelmed or in a hurry. These were ads that we drove them back actually to their YouTube channel, and there were these short little 10-minute helpful clips from the lead pastor, Clint, that just address these needs. This was crazy to me. A 4.34% click-through rate is insane to me. That tells me there's a lot of people in this community that are dealing with some of these issues, and they're looking for solutions to their problems. Content is super helpful. You guys can probably get some of this content out of a series you've already done. You just have to cut it down and do little 10-minute clips. And this is a great way to bridge the gap from brand awareness to showing up on Sunday, is just being helpful in the middle when life is hard. You can see there in kind of small print, I need my better glasses, $200 in that campaign, I think it was. You don't have to spend a lot of money on content to be effective. 1,700 people watch that content because of a $200 ad investment. It's phenomenal. So key takeaways before I show you kind of one last dashboard. Key takeaways for net new content. Like I said, helpful video content consistently outperforms every other campaign. Video ads outperform still images. It's where you should spend your time because it's what works the best. Like I said, event out campaigns outperform series as a part of that. Paid social outperforms programmatic. So if you think about the accurate ads, right, those are great for brand awareness. The goal there is not clicks. If you want clicks, leverage paid social because people are more willing to click through an ad on paid social than they are on web as a part of that. And then felt need topics, like I said, anxiety, difficult conversations, being in a hurry, which I am now trying to give you guys enough time for questions, is super effective. The next slide really just talks about the last three of these. Low spend can still win. Like I said, you don't have to invest $10,000 a month in advertising. You can start with $200 or $300. Just don't go lower than that. There is a point of diminishing returns. One of the things that we'll see with some churches is they'll say, okay, we're going to invest $500 a month in digital advertising across 5 campaigns. Not ideal because you really have $100 per campaign. It's just not going to be effective. It's not going to work. It's better to stay at that $200 to $300 at a minimum. You're going to stay at a minimum. The last piece on here, church audiences have a lower, oh, sorry, Cliff. Church audiences have a lower advertising competition. So this is like really interesting. If you guys think about the way digital advertising work, it's all this real-time bid system. So if you think about that Weather Channel example, I had the Acura ads, that digital space is up for bid and a whole bunch of advertisers are bidding for that space. And the best bid is what wins the space. Pretty straightforward, right? What's interesting is when I'm going after church audience specifically around church advertising, there's basically no competition. What it costs me to advertise on the Weather Channel for a local church is a lot lower than the cost it is to do Acura, who's going to pay a lot more money for that same space because they're competing with other car companies, other car brands. So I think we're still in this space right now where there's not a lot of advertising. The cost to advertise is pretty low. It's a great opportunity to leverage as the church. So this last slide, I just want to show you because I think I talked about kind of separate campaigns, but I wanted to show you how this works as it all comes together. So what you guys see here is a dashboard that we use with a lot of our churches that just helps us drive decisions on a week-to-week basis about where we're going to invest, what campaigns we're going to work on as a part of that. The top row up there is a Stack Adapt brand. So that's everything web-based. Again, those Acura ads, that's showing performance of just brand ads in the community. The middle one where it says Meta Movie Night. So this is, they do community movie nights a couple times a year. Obviously, it's their winter right now, if I get that straight. I think Sue might be here, so she can correct me on that. She's from the Beyond Church. But they do some movie nights for the community. It's a midweek thing. It's not on a Sunday at all. And then the last one is just, again, some more brand ads, but on Meta this time. And you can see what that creative is. The very bottom row there just shows you Google Analytics. So you can kind of see where we started advertising for them. That kind of sharp curve up, right, is on average, they were getting about 200 visitors per month to their website. We turned on a bunch of advertising for them. It went up to over 2,000 visitors in a single month just because of this advertising thing. So more people know that they exist. What I think is interesting about the campaigns we're running is that the Stack Adapt ones, the brand ones at the top, and the Four Griffin ones at the bottom, are those pieces that drive that awareness that I was talking about is so important. And that's really what set up the success for that middle layer in terms of the movie night as a part of that. Those click-through rates are phenomenal. Like it's like, yeah, this is nothing better that I could ever want, right? As a part of that. Where the real payoff comes is actually on the movie night. So they just did this a few weeks ago. They had 70 families show up for this movie night. 69 of the 70 were brand new to church, hadn't been to a church, had no church affiliation, were not Christians. It was a massive opportunity to kind of set the stage as a part of that. That's a great example of why these events and why these two campaigns working together work so well.
Dude,
That's
I
it.
love that. Thank you, man. This is so thorough and so helpful, and I love that it's based on not theory, but real
Yeah.
world trial and error with several of our partner churches, ICM partner churches around the world. Thank you so much for that. We already have many uh, uh, questions in the hopper. However, it's not too late. If you're out there and you still didn't get a chance to put your question in, go into the chat, change your function to everyone, and put your question in there, and we'll get that to Ryan. Ryan, before we get to the questions, one of the things I thought was funny was I'm sure if anybody on here that is a communicator, a preacher, they were probably not happy to hear that their sermon series was not the number one thing people were clicking on. 'Cause
100%.
it's the events, it's the jingle jam. Yeah,
It is.
that's funny. I love that. All right. So, with that said, Ryan, are you ready to pivot away from the presentation and tackle some of
Yeah,
these questions
let's
that
do
people
it.
are sending in? All right. Actually, the first question is was asked multiple times, so
Okay.
many people were wondering, and it and the question is kind of going all the way back to square one of the basic idea of okay, what is like almost talk to me like I'm 5 years old. How do we get these native and display marketing ads on the Weather Channel? Like what? How do we do? Like what do we do? Like literally, how do we make that happen? Like what is step one of go to this website, do this? Like how do people begin that journey of display ads on websites like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for that particular segment, there's two platforms I'd recommend. One is Stack Adapt, and the other one is AdRoll. They're two great programmatic platforms that all have very helpful guides, and they have some advertising platforms you get into have advertising minimums, but both of those have no minimums as a part of it. I think both of those platforms will actually create the ads for free for you if you want to be a part of that. So it's pretty easy. And again, I think they both do a phenomenal job in terms of just education on how to set up basic campaigns and get them rolling as a part of that. But start there for programmatic.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Stack, adapt, and add roll. Is that what you said?
Cool.
Okay,
That's it.
perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, the next few questions are like uh using you as a consultant. Like, hey, here's my specific situation.
Yeah.
What should I do? Okay, so the first one is do you have any advice on advertising specifically to young adults like 18 to 28?
Oh,
Um, like it's a church that's wanting to grow that ministry segment of their church and get their name out there. So, any recommendations or tips on
I
reach,
love this
audience,
question because
platforms?
I had a slide on
Yeah.
this and I hit it because of time. So I
Oh,
love that somebody, it's perfect timing.
okay,
Um,
great.
so really, really interesting is Snapchat. Honestly, it is
Okay.
crazy to me how effective Snapchat is at reaching actually a little bit wider than that 16 to 28 year olds, 16 to 26 year olds. You don't have to be super active on the platform in terms of organic, but it makes it really easy to advertise to that group. One of the things that's really unique about that age group and really Snapchat specifically is you can do lead gen programs where you can ask for information in exchange for sending them a guide or helpful content or whatever it is. People in my generation, and Louis, you're like 18. I think you're the younger generation, so you may be more that side of it. But my generation on the older side, I don't give my information in a forum to anyone for any reason. I just don't do it. That particular segment, the 16 to 28 year olds, if they see a lead gen opportunity on Snapchat, all day long they're giving you their contact information. I don't know if they haven't figured out how advertising works yet, but but it's really, really effective. So Snapchat would be number one. It's probably the lowest paid social channel out there, so it's really cost effective. And then number two is focused specifically on Instagram, and not so much Facebook if you think about the Meta platform.
Okay, so on those on Snapchat and Instagram to advertise with those or on those or through those, do you have to go to any third party thing or you do it through that platform?
Yep, you do it through that platform. You just have to have a profile set up, like you
Mhm.
would, like your Instagram profile. You'd set one up on Snapchat, and it's if you just Google Snapchat ads and then Meta ads, the both those sites will come up, and it's really easy to stand up some campaigns there directly.
Okay, so if they're trying to grow their young adults ministry, they would create a Snapchat profile of their young adults ministry and then do that advertising
Hmm.
through that. Okay,
Yep, exactly.
awesome. Okay,
That's a great one, by the way. I'll just throw this out there: the brand ambassadors and user generated content. If you already have some of those young adults right in the church, get them in there doing the 15-20 second ads for you and put that on Snapchat. It's just going to work so much better.
perfect, perfect. Okay, yeah, that's great. Okay, here's another one that's similar to that. Um, this church is they're having to move buildings
Hmm.
and they'll likely be moving into a new part of town with a new community. Um, and so they're asking, how would you go about raising awareness in that new area where that area may not have heard of that church before?
Yeah, yeah, that I would be all about. Actually, I would leverage as many of those channels as you can within the budget you have. So think programmatically, you think about LinkedIn and
So
Snapchat.
that's the ad roll you were talking about.
Yep. Stack Adapt, leverage
Mhm.
Snapchat, Meta. So you want to be on as many platforms as possibly can. I think it's a great opportunity with a move to do like a teaser campaign. So coming soon type of stuff. Think about movie premieres and all that
Oh
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Create some excitement and some interest. You're like, what is this thing? Especially if you drive them back to like a single page microsite website where it's got a countdown timer about when we're going to make the announcement of what this is.
Oh,
it,
nice.
it creates some excitement about it, but it also creates a little bit of good frustration. Like, what
Yeah.
is this thing? Now I'm like tuned in, right? Especially if you do drop like a single field form that it is like enter your email address to be the first to know type of stuff. That stuff works really well. Same thing, follow us to be the first to know. That can be a great way to just leverage some of that suspense to get people engaged, but then be as wide as you possibly can within that community across your channels.
Gotcha. I love that. Yeah, that same idea I remember when Gwinnett Church, one of the North Point campuses here in
Yeah.
Atlanta, was getting ready to launch. Their signage just said hashtag for Gwinnett, and it created this
Yeah.
buzz of like, what is this thing that's
What
coming? What
is
is this
this thing?
happening? And you know,
100%.
and then yeah, so that's
Yeah.
the
If you want to go one step farther, which could be effective, is if you do some Google ad campaigns and specifically set up campaigns targeting people who are searching. This is horrible. Maybe that's horrible. Searching for other churches in the area. So somebody's looking for another church in the area, bid on those keywords. So if somebody's looking up whatever, the Catholic Church, I'm just making that up, but whatever,
Mhm.
another church in that community, they would find you as a result of that. That's another way to go after people who are already looking for a church.
Yeah, yeah, and they're in that area you're moving to, but they don't know you exist yet. That's a
Yep,
good way for them to
exactly.
find out that you exist. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, Google business profile too. Make sure that man. People find so many churches through a good, strong Google business profile.
Okay, great. This is all such good, helpful stuff. Okay, here's another scenario. All right. This is a church that is a 100-year-old church in Seattle.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, and they are looking to do like a rebranding campaign. So maybe churches do know they exist, but they're trying to recreate how they're seen and thought of in the community. Like what kind of advice would you give them from a digital marketing standpoint?
Oh, so many places to go because I would start asking questions like, is it an old church building that everybody's like, oh, that's that like old building? I mean, like
Uh-huh.
things like you think about actual spaces as a part of that and what people know about the actual physical location, I think, are
Hmm.
questions you have to ask. I think it's an opportunity. You kind of have to decide. I don't know where you're at in terms of the rebrand because there are some situations where people want to say, hey, we want like a hard line. We don't want anybody to know we were affiliated with this 100-year-old church, like rip the band-aid off thing. And then
Hmm.
there's other ones that are like, no, no, I think our history is important to us, but we want to make sure people know that we're evolving kind of as a part of that, right? And so
Yeah.
I think those have different strategies. If it's the latter,
I'm
where you
assuming I'm assuming this is not a relocation. It's not even a new building and it's not a renaming. I'm assuming it's not any of those things. They're just trying to rebrand. that same church name in that same building, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So part of that is going to be just doing a co-branding strategy. So think about those brand ads. Instead of having one logo, you have two logos and you do a transition over time with that. So you
Okay.
start with what is known, the visual identity that's known, and then you kind of have this whatever. A Claro is now Red Cup, right? And then you slowly
Yeah.
start kind of changing the prominence of those brands. And then it
Okay.
just changes in people's mind over time. That's the best way to do it. Um,
Okay.
I think you have some opportunities, especially if the visual identity is a lot different between, the transition. You have a really cool opportunity with like reels and carousels and stuff in terms of meta where you can kind of flip through some of the different looks of that, especially as you think about it as a timeline in terms of how we're evolving. Leverage some of those maybe more creative assets than just straight image ads or text ads.
Okay. Okay. Cool. That's helpful. Okay, we got one more question I want to throw your way, but before we get to that question, um, if you guys are on the webinar today and you've heard us talking about all this marketing stuff, but you also heard us talking about this beta with these partner churches around the world that we're working with, and you're here today and you're like, yeah, this is great, helpful stuff. But what are you talking about? This partnership? What exactly are these partner churches of ICN? And you're curious about that, and you just want to know more about partnership, becoming a partnership church of ICN. What is that? What does that look like? What all is involved? What are the expectations? And you're just curious and you want to ask questions. There's my email address on the screen, louis.lavoy@irresistible.church. Just email me and I'll be happy to answer your questions either through email or jump on a Zoom call if that's something you want to do and talk a little bit more about what it looks like to move from being a church that's kind of picking up things here and there from ICN, from webinars and emails and things, and actually becoming a partner church of ICN. If you're curious about what that looks like, I would be happy to meet you, get to know a little bit more about you and your story and your church, what you guys are doing, and answer any questions that I can about ICN. All right, Ryan. So the last question is kind of a broader, more philosophical question. What would you say to people that might have jumped on here, heard this, and they're still like, I'm still trying to decide in my brain if a church should even be doing marketing. Like something in their brain is just there's not a connect. They're like, man, is this
Yeah.
something we should really be doing? Shouldn't this all be, word of mouth or relational or boots on the ground in our community? Obviously, all of our ICM partner churches promote that idea of in investing and inviting and being out in our community, doing good and serving our neighbors and friends and coworkers. And obviously that is not going away, and that is a huge part of what we're doing. But would you say the person is like, yeah, should we even be doing digital? Should we be marketing churches digitally on the internet? So
Yeah.
how would you answer that? And I'm sure I think you have even told me you've gotten that question many times, right?
Yeah, I have. I get that. It's probably the most frequent question I get. And this kind of goes back to my aha moment, so to speak, for this beta program. It actually goes back to last summer. I was listening to a podcast with Dr. John Grasmick. He was talking about the historical backgrounds for the New Testament. So just talking about what was happening in the world between the Old Testament and the New Testament, which feels like this kind of quiet period. And one of the things he said was like this light bulb moment, as he said, everybody thought God was quiet then, but what was actually happening is the Roman Empire was getting built up and the establishment of the Roman roads was getting kind of paved all throughout the Mediterranean rim back there, which were eventually the roads that Paul used to go into the community and into all these different communities to spread the word, right, as a part of that.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, it was like this light bulb moment. I think for our generation, digital marketing is our version of those Roman roads. And the communities we're trying to reach, our communities are on these, they're on our phones. I mean, that's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
a lot of community happens now. So when I think about, the Great Commission and I think about going into communities, I think the most effective way to reach into your community is to do that, using digital and advertising tools as a part of that.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. No, and I even thought while you were saying that, I even thought about that Paul and other uh, New Testament writers that wrote letters and that eventually became the New Testament. They
Yeah,
were using the technology of their day, which was just
100%.
pen and parchment or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever that was. That was the technology of their time, and I'm sure they would have loved a display ad on the Weather Channel
Yeah.
if possible.
It would have been easier, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's great. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for taking
Absolutely.
some time with us. One, for the loads of time you're taking with our partner churches to help walk them through these different campaigns to get the name out there. I love seeing all these results of impressions and click through rates and all that kind of stuff. And I know our prayer and your prayer is that these aren't just numbers on a dashboard, that these are people whose lives are being changed because they were people who are not involved in church, had walked away from God, and now they are getting connected into churches, being inspired to follow Jesus, hopefully putting their faith in Jesus, following him in baptism. Their lives are being changed, their families' futures are being changed. So this is all great stuff. Thank you for all that. Thank you for taking some time today just to drop some helpful nuggets of wisdom for the people who tuned in today. Everybody else, thank you for jumping in on the webinar today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for submitting questions. Um, if you have any other questions, feel free to let us know. Like I said, I gave you my email address earlier. If you have any questions about marketing or specifically about becoming a partner church of ICN, would love to talk with you and get to know a little bit more about you from that. With that said, everybody have a great rest of the day. It's summertime. Get to a pool, get to a lake, get to a beach, do something. But definitely have a great rest of the week. See you, Ryan. Have a good one, my friend.
Thanks, Louis. You too.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye bye.